Hey boys, it's HarmNone. Today, we are going to be ranking all of the Pfister vehicles in Grand Theft Auto Online in tier list form. Now most of these vehicles are pretty good, some of them are kind of bad, and of course each of them is going to be assigned into a specific tier. Now if you have never seen one of my tier list videos before, there is something that you must know. This list is 100% factual and cannot be argued with. If you disagree, you are simply wrong. I am always right when it comes to these tier lists. If you accept these terms and conditions, we can move on into the video. However, if you refuse these terms and conditions, you must click off of the video immediately. These vehicles are going to be getting ranked based on their performance, their overall ability, their customizability, and just whether or not they're a good vehicle. So anyway guys, we're going to go ahead and start off with F tier. To start off F tier, we are beginning with the regular Pfister Comet. Now I want to be perfectly clear with this video. I actually like every single vehicle that Pfister makes in Grand Theft Auto Online. I think they're all fantastic. However, this is a tier list, so I do have to rank these cars. And unfortunately, the regular Comet is just not the best Pfister vehicle. Now the Comet goes for $100,000, so it's very close to being able to being stolen off the street, but unfortunately it just isn't quite there. If it was $99,000, you could just steal these off the street, so that would be pretty nice, but of course you're not actually able to do that though. Now the Pfister Comet, for what it is, for a $100,000 car, it is pretty damn good, I have to say. However, the problem with the Pfister Comet is it has really good handling, and then all of a sudden it doesn't. I don't know how to describe this, but if you've ever driven a Pfister Comet, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're going to be going through a corner and the car is going to be handling really well, and then next thing you know, you're drifting and you hit a... wow, this is awfully fitting. You hit a telephone pole in your red Porsche. Now, like I said, I really do like the Pfister Comet. I think it's a great car, and for $100,000, you really cannot go wrong with this thing. However, it just doesn't handle as well as you might hope for. But still not a bad car. Unfortunately though, its performance does get it ranked in F tier. That's not to say it's a bad car. It's actually a car that I'd recommend picking up if you don't have much money in GTA, or if you're looking for a new sports car. It's actually got some decent customization. It's a good car overall, but in terms of this list, in terms of all the other Pfister vehicles, it is of course in F tier. So that's it for the first vehicle of the list. Let's move on to the next one. Next up in F tier, and for the final vehicle of F tier, we have the Pfister Comet S2 Cabrio. Now again, I think that this is actually a pretty cool car. I really do like the look of the vehicle, and it is also the only convertible Pfister vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online, so that is pretty cool. Don't ask me why my character just slid through the ground like that, I have no idea. So like I said, this thing is a convertible of course, which is pretty cool, and with the top down, I do think that this car looks okay. However, with the top up, I think it is pretty unforgivable how badly this car looks. Now unfortunately, the Pfister Comet S2 Cabrio kind of suffers the same fate as the regular Comet. It has good handling up to a point, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't. Now the S2 Cabrio definitely does have better handling than the regular Pfister Comet, I must give it that. However, it's still not as good as you would hope for, considering that this car costs $1.8 million, which is quite a lot of money. Now don't get me wrong, it is still a cool car. It's got quite a lot of customization as well, which is pretty cool, and of course it has an active rear spoiler, which is a pretty rare feature to have on a car in Grand Theft Auto Online. Overall, it has decent performance, the acceleration is okay, the top speed is okay, the handling is definitely its worst feature, and the handling isn't actually as bad as you would think, or as I was initially believing it was. Now unfortunately, this thing is just going to be ranked in F tier because there are a lot of good Pfister vehicles, and I felt like it was most at home in F tier considering it's not the fastest, doesn't have the best handling, but it is a pretty cool looking vehicle, and of course it is the only convertible Pfister vehicle in the game. So, good car, want everyone to understand that I think it's a good car. The only problem is the handling really, and that gets it ranked in F tier. So that's it for the Pfister Comet S2 Cabrio. Let's move on to the next vehicle and start off C tier. To start off C tier, we have the Pfister Comet S2. Now this is the regular S2, this is not the Cabrio version of the car. Now the regular S2 gets ranked a little bit higher than the Cabrio because it has a better top speed, a little bit better acceleration, worse handling. That is something that I have noticed with the Pfister Comet S2 compared to the Cabrio, is this thing actually does have worse handling. However, this car has many more customization options, and like I said, better acceleration and a higher top speed as well. Now the Pfister Comet S2 I do believe is overall a better car than the S2 Cabrio, simply because of the acceleration and top speed. I know I've mentioned that 3 times now, I might mention it again, but we'll see. The S2 really is just the better car in general. I mean, more customization. It's a better looking vehicle as well because it doesn't have the god-awful soft top that the Cabrio has. Now the S2 goes for a little bit more money than the S2 Cabrio. This thing goes for $1.9 million, so it is a little bit more expensive. For that price, I mean, like I said, hey, this is the 4th time. Higher top speed and better acceleration. But you do get worse handling. So if you really care about handling more than anything else about a car, you should probably buy the S2 Cabrio. However, the S2 still does handle, I mean, decently well. Not as well as you would hope for a 911, but still handles okay enough. But for the extra 100k, you might want to save that money and put it into something that handles a little bit better. Overall, the S2, I felt like it wasn't quite deserving of being an F tier. I do really like this car. It's got a lot of customization that you can do to it. You can make several different styles of 911s with this thing, which I think is really cool. And I do believe that it honestly just doesn't deserve to be an F tier. Very good car. However, can't say that I necessarily recommend it because there are better cars coming up on this list that are a little bit cheaper. So stay tuned. Let's move on to the next vehicle within C tier. Next up, for the final vehicle of C tier, we have the Pfister Comet Retro Custom. Now, in order to make the Retro Custom, you're going to have to buy yourself a regular Comet. Then you're going to have to take it to a custom auto shop within a CEO office or an agency, something like that, or take it to Benny's. And then you're going to have to spend about $800,000, from what I remember, to upgrade it into the Pfister Comet Retro Custom. Now, the Comet Retro Custom is one of the most customizable cars in the entire game. It takes a regular Comet and turns it into a vintage 911, which is really cool. It's got so much customization. You can put a really wide kit on the car to make it into a wide body, or you can go a little more subtle with it. No matter what, you are going to have some flared arches and the car is going to look a bit older. It is really cool though. The amount of customization that you can do to this thing is absolutely incredible. For the extra money on top of that, it also makes the regular Comet handle a little bit better. Now this thing does tend to have a bit of understeer, which I don't necessarily like, but I still feel like it's an overall improvement over the regular Comet. It's pretty good in my book, and it's relatively cheap, and for all the customization you get, I think it is a pretty great car. Now, you won't win any races with this thing, unfortunately, because it's just not that fast, but for free mode and cruising around, it is really cool, as well as taking it to car meets. So there you have it. That's it for the Pfister Comet Retro Custom. This thing is at the top of C tier, and now it's time to move on to B tier. Next up, to start off B tier, we of course have the Pfister Growler. Now, the Pfister Growler is kind of what I feel like the S2 and the S2 Cabrio should have been a little more like. Now, I know that this is based off of a completely different Porsche. It's based off of a Cayman GT4 primarily, but I do really feel like the other cars should have been a little more like this thing when it comes to handling. Now, this is a smaller car, so obviously it is going to be a bit lighter, so it's probably going to handle a little bit better. But the Growler really is just a much better version of the Pfister Comet S2 and the S2 Cabrio, except obviously this thing's not convertible. The Growler has tons and tons of customization, and it comes in at a little bit of a cheaper price in comparison to the S2, coming in at $1.6 million. And for that price, you get a really nice little sports car. Definitely one of my favorite cars that Pfister actually makes in GTA. However, I couldn't rank it any higher than B tier because it just isn't that great. It's good, don't get me wrong. I don't really hate this thing at all, but it just could be a little tiny bit better. Again, the problem with this thing and the problem with the S2 and the S2 Cabrio is the handling just still isn't quite how you would hope that it would be. Now, that's not to say that the Pfister Growler's handling is bad, it's just a little bit loose feeling, and it just kind of feels a little tiny bit unpredictable. But that's not necessarily super bad. It does have pretty good acceleration and an okay top speed as well. The main thing about it is that it's just smaller than the S2, kind of handles a little bit nicer than the S2, and has a lot of customization. Overall, I think that the Growler is just the better car, and I know it's definitely the faster car around a track compared to the S2, so that's really why it got ranked a little bit higher on this list. Anyway guys, that's pretty much it for the Pfister Growler to start off B tier. Let's move on to the next vehicle. Next up, for the final car in B tier, we have the Pfister Comet Safari. Now, the Pfister Comet Safari is a fantastic car. This thing goes for $710,000, and for that price, it's one of the best off-roading vehicles in all of Grand Theft Auto Online. This thing has insanely quick acceleration, very good handling, especially off-road, but on-road it's really good too. The only thing that it doesn't have is a super great top speed. In addition to all of this, it's also got front-mounted machine guns that you can equip it with if you take it into an MOC or an Avenger. It's got a pretty insane amount of ground clearance as well. This should allow you to go over pretty much anything that you will need to go over in GTA. It's got a great handbrake, it's got great handling, the car is super responsive. Overall, it's definitely one of my favorite vehicles in the entire game to drive off-road. It's just got so much grip, it's so responsive. I can't talk about this thing enough. It really is just a fantastic off-road vehicle, and just because it's good off-road doesn't mean that it's bad on-road either. It's still just as quick on-road, it's more at home off-road, I would say. So the Pfister Comet Safari, if you're looking for a great off-roading vehicle, of course Pfister makes one with the Comet Safari. This thing is absolutely awesome, and it's definitely a car that I recommend checking out if you've never tried it before. Anyway guys, that is it for the Pfister Comet Safari, and that is also it for B tier. It's time to move on to some of the more heavy hitters in A tier. So let's get started. For the first car of A tier, we of course have the Pfister Neon. Now the Pfister Neon goes for $1.5 million, and it's based pretty heavily off of a Porsche Taycan Turbo S in real life. So a pretty cool car. In GTA, the Neon is a very, very quick car, and part of that is to do with the fact that this thing is 100% electric. So the acceleration on this car is absolutely insane. However, the top speed is a little bit lacking, but what it lacks in top speed, of course, it makes up for in acceleration, and the handling of the vehicle is pretty okay too. This thing is all-wheel drive, so it does have a really good launch off the line, and it can also pull itself out of a corner relatively easily. Now the Neon, I can't lie, it's not exactly my favorite Pfister vehicle in the game. I don't think that it handles as well as a lot of the other Pfister vehicles, which is saying something because a lot of them don't really handle that well. The Neon has a sort of weird handling balance. I almost feel like the car is actually like 60% of the power is going to the front wheels and 40% is going to the rear. It's got a strange sort of balance to it, at least that's how it feels to me. Don't get me wrong, still handles pretty nicely, still a great car, and of course it is also a 4-seater, so you can roll around with some friends in this thing, and of course you can do that in complete silence because it is an electric vehicle. Overall, for 1.5 mil, you can't really go wrong with a Neon. It's not my first recommendation. I'd say there's definitely cars that are better on this list, but it is still a really, really cool car nonetheless. So that's it for the Pfister Neon. Let's move on to the next vehicle within A tier. Next up, for the final vehicle of A tier, we have the Pfister Astron. Now, the Pfister Astron is the 4th fastest, or now 5th fastest SUV in Grand Theft Auto Online, formerly the 4th fastest. Now the Astron, of course, is a 4-seater because, well, it's an SUV. It's got all-wheel drive, and it's pretty damn quick, and I have to say it's really fun to drive. This thing does not feel much like an SUV. In fact, I actually believe that this thing has better handling than the Pfister Neon, which is in the sports category, so that is saying something. The Pfister Astron is also faster than the Neon, I would argue, especially around a circuit, but also it's got a much better top speed as well. The Astron also has lots and lots of customization, so that is pretty cool, and on top of that, it is a great looking vehicle, matching up very similarly to the Porsche Macan GTS in real life. So that is pretty cool. This thing is very, very heavily copyright infringed off of the real life version of it. Overall, the Pfister Astron is a pretty great SUV. Like I said, it's the 4th or 5th fastest SUV in the entire game now, so it is competitive within the SUV racing category, so it's not too bad to own. It does go for $1.6 million, which is a little tiny bit steep. However, for that price, I would still definitely buy another one. So if you guys are looking for a cool SUV, the Pfister Astron might be one for you. That's it for the Pfister Astron, and that is it for A tier. It's time to move on to the true cream of the crop as far as Pfister vehicles are concerned. So let's get it started with the first vehicle of S tier. The first vehicle that we have to start off S tier is of course the Pfister 811. Now this might surprise some of you guys that this thing is the start of S tier and not at the very end of S tier, but I do have some good reasoning for that. Now the 811 goes for about $1.1 million, so that is a pretty fair price considering the overall performance ability of this car. Of course, the 811 is the only Pfister vehicle in the entire game as of right now that is within the supercars category, so that is a pretty interesting little fact. The 811 is also based very heavily off of the Porsche 918 Spyder in real life, which is a very, very cool hypercar. Now the 811 in-game didn't quite match up with the copyright infringing that they've done on some of the other Pfister vehicles on this list, or some of the other vehicles they've copyright infringed either. But anyways, it's still a pretty unique looking supercar in GTA. I feel like the back end of it is really, really well done. However, the front is, well, it looks like that, so yeah, I don't know, but Now, what makes the 811 really unique within the supercars category is this thing has an insanely high top speed. This was formerly the fastest vehicle in the entire game in terms of top speed. It tops out at about 132, closer to 133 miles per hour. So that's pretty damn quick for a supercar, even by today's standards. However, where the 811 kind of lacks, at least on the racetrack, is in the handling department. Now in free mode, I've never had a problem with the 811. However, I took this thing into a race several years ago, and that's when I sort of ran into trouble with the 811 and kind of stopped using it for racing. It doesn't really handle that well on a racetrack. I don't know how to describe this. In free mode, the 811 handles really well, really nicely. It's a very well put together car. It's planted, does pretty much everything that you want it to do. It does have a slight bit of oversteer, but nothing to really complain about. However, on the racetrack, there's something that happens to this car that just makes it almost undrivable. I don't know if it just can't take corners as quickly as you need to in a racetrack setting or what it is, but even with its super high top speed, I was not able to get any solid laps in with the 811 on pretty much any track that I took it on. So unfortunately, it's not a great car for racing. However, it is a really good car for free mode in my opinion. So that's pretty much it for the Pfister 811 to start off S tier. Let's move on to the next vehicle within S tier. Next up, for the second vehicle of S tier, we have the Pfister Comet SR. Now this is by far the best handling Comet in the entire game, and it goes for $1,100,000, which is a pretty fair price considering the overall performance that this thing buys you. Now the Pfister Comet SR has a pretty good amount of customization for the age in which this thing actually is, and it also ranks as, I believe, currently the 8th fastest sports car around a track in GTA Online, so long as the track, you know, has corners and stuff like that. If it's a straight line, it's not going to place 8th out of all the sports cars in the game. So on track, this thing is really capable. Like I said, it is the best handling Comet by far. This thing does pretty much exactly what you ask of it. It will go around any corner pretty much as fast as you want, within reason obviously, and it will be grippy the entire time. The Comet SR is absolutely awesome, and it is by far my favorite Comet in the entire game, and for the price in which it goes for, you really cannot beat this thing. So if you guys want a semi-competitive sports car made by Pfister in GTA Online, the Pfister Comet SR is the car for you. Relatively cheap, I mean, great performance for the money. It's just an overall fantastic vehicle. I cannot recommend picking up the Pfister Comet SR enough. This thing is absolutely awesome. So the Pfister Comet SR is the second best Pfister vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online, in my opinion, of course. And of course, my opinion is correct. Let's not forget. So that's it for the Pfister Comet SR. It's time to move on to the #1 Pfister vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online. And unfortunately, I cannot show you the #1 vehicle. Of course, I'm on the PC version of Grand Theft Auto Online, and the vehicle that I'm talking about is the Pfister Astron Custom HSW. Is the best Pfister vehicle in Grand Theft Auto Online in terms of performance. This is the #1 SUV in the entire game in terms of lap time, so it of course is getting a better ranking than any other vehicle on this list because it does more in its category than any of the other vehicles did for theirs. And because I can't show you the Pfister Astron Custom HSW in-game, I'm going to take the car that it beat out for the #1 spot in the SUV category. And this is of course the Pegasi Toros. Now, the Toros was previously the fastest SUV in the game, but now the Pfister Astron Custom HSW holds that spot. So the best way that I can kind of show you the performance ability of the Astron Custom is by showing you the car that it beat, and that is of course the Toros. Now I know the Toros is not a Pfister vehicle by any means, I am well aware of that. However, the overall abilities of the Pfister Astron Custom HSW are equivalent and a little bit better to that of the Toros. From what I've heard, the Astron Custom HSW has much better acceleration, a better top speed, and of course better handling than the Pegasi Toros. So that is pretty high praise because the Toros is one of the best SUVs in the entire game ever. This thing, I mean, it only cost $500,000 and it was literally the #1 fastest SUV in the game for like literally years. So this thing is crazy, but the Astron Custom is even crazier than this thing. Now I would love to show you guys gameplay of this. Unfortunately, I don't quite have enough money on my expanded and enhanced character in order to do that, but you guys will just have to kind of imagine that the Pfister Astron Custom HSW is driving here on the screen and not the Pegasi Toros. So anyway guys, there you have it. That has been the ultimate Pfister vehicle tier list in Grand Theft Auto Online. Let me know what you thought of my list in the comments down below. Of course, just remember that I am right and you are wrong if you disagree, so that's one thing you got to keep in mind. Let me know in the comments down below as well what other tier lists you guys would like to see for vehicle manufacturers in GTA, or just tier lists in general. Leave a like if you guys enjoyed the video, dislike if you didn't of course, subscribe if you guys are new, and I will see you all in the next video. Until then, take care. Peace.